for joining us on From the Dust with our host, Sarah Decker. We will be speaking with Jonathan McCormick today on how following Christ usually doesn't look at all the way we thought it would.
It was like I tried to do it the world's way and it broke me. And it's like, so what have like a lot of my questions to God been about money and providing and how it works and how it works, like, how God does that and how do you do it, especially when, it's not just one person or two or three or five. You have this group of people that you're providing for. It's like, how do you do that?
You're listening to another episode of From the Dust with Sarah Decker, a place to explore spiritual experiences and topics. And no, we are never alone. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here this morning and being on the podcast. A friend of mine introduced us, mutual friend, and that is great. I'm looking forward to the conversation today and seeing how it unfolds. So I would appreciate it if you would just introduce yourself to our listeners this morning before we start our conversation.
Sure. So my name's Jonathan McCormick, and I have an interesting past. Sometimes I don't know what to share, but basically, I'm a writer. So I write something every day. I write a little piece whenever I think and try to. Years ago, I sat down to put something onto paper. I thought I'm going to try to say something every day to the world. And when I did, it came out as a poem, which surprised me. And the next day I did it again, and it came out as a poem again. And after a few weeks of that, I thought, I think I'm a poet. It was kind of a surprise. It was like, oh my gosh. Well, that's kind of cool, but it was probably more cool in the 1600s, But it's like, it's not the hip thing anymore. But anyway, so I write a little something every day. I write stories, which a few have finished themselves. There's one that I'm writing now, which I'm obviously hopeful will finish itself. I'm excited about. But I've had a road just like everybody else has, and I've experienced a path of great loss of everything and everyone I love in a way, and I think we all experience stuff like that. I think partially because what's happening, it appears to me what's happening. It feels like I got an early version, but it feels like it's coming for the world. But it's going to be a journey out of everything we know and out of everything we think we are. And it's not coming for one group of people, it's coming for all people. And so you can see I kind of experienced it early. And it was tumultuous, very tumultuous. But I had an experience once where I felt God say to me, it was during a period that I was complaining, and what he said was, be grateful for this time, because when I get involved with your life again, it'll be tumultuous. Every time I touch your life, it's tumultuous. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I get this feeling like God gives us certain principles, and then he's there. It's not to say that he's not involved, but whenever he puts his hands to the clay to change us, it's always tumultuous. And so, because even the things that we think are good aren't completely good, and even the things we think are bad aren't always bad. It's very perplexing when God starts to get into your heart and mind and show you the way that he views the world. And so I've had a little bit of that, and it what it brought upon my consciousness, upon my world, was something so different that it completely blew me out of the water. And it's taken me some years to adapt to what you could call, I often call it the new life. But it's a life of complete dependence upon God from day to day, and it's probably more than that. But anyways, that's a little bit of an introduction, and I'll probably share more as time goes on. So,
sounds good. Thank you for that. And I know that as we share, we connect to hearts. And so my prayer today is that as we discuss, it will help someone that is with whatever they're going through. And sometimes I feel like this has been true in my life. Sometimes God asks us to do things what feels like early. He just had me go. He needs us to go through this with him, and then reach our hands back to help those who are going to go through it at a later date. And so in some ways it's, this, at least for me, it's been this balance of mourning the loss of whatever that tumultuous time felt like it lost in our lives, and appreciating the beauty of all that you've gained in Christ, and the newfound understanding and the peace and the beauty that brings into your life that is also goes along with some of those feelings of loss. And so it is a soul growing experience. At least I know that has been for me. And so thanks for being here and for being willing to share. I'm really interested to hear, because I mean, I haven't asked you this, but it sounds like you weren't a writer before that time. So
yeah, go ahead.
I'm so curious, like, what was your career, kind of what were you doing prior to that? And then God kind of like shook it up.
Okay. So I've done a few things. I've never, I think you could call it a fault as well. But I'll I have a tendency to take too long to answer questions. I'll try to make it fast. As a young man, I remember when I was a sophomore in high school, I joined the choir and found like my new love. Like I just love singing and music, and I decided I wanted to be a high school choral director. That was how much it impacted me. It was like, wow, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I didn't change that until I years later I went on a mission for the LDS Church, and during my mission, I wasn't involved with choirs, and I came home thinking, well, I could probably do other things. And then I had some other things come along in my life that made me think, well, you got to earn more money. And so I decided, well, maybe I'll be a doctor or a chiropractor or something. And I started, like doing some of the prerequisites for medical school. And the problem is that the kind of people who become doctors are not the kind of people who say, well, yeah, I guess I could kind of do that, if it works out. They're the kind of people that are very driven and very focused. So, after a couple of years, I took a semester off, never went back. But I always had the attitude of like, well, God will provide. God will provide. In fact, it got me into trouble when I first got married. It was like, I think my in-laws were like, what's wrong with him? He doesn't have a plan, and it's like, anyways, long story short, time went on and God did provide. Worked for in the corporate world for about 6 years. And then I started a window cleaning business, cleaned a bunch of windows for about 5 years. And then I started an heirloom seed business, and I ran that for about 5 years. And then I kind of had a collapse. I went through a stressful period, started having panic attacks, and then kind of entered into this journey that we were talking about, this faith journey. Um, and after several years of that, maybe 3 years, 4 years, I realized I was kind of broken to doing most things. At the end of my last business, I'd been having like panic attacks every day, could hardly work. Um, and I remember so then I started just taking temporary jobs and stuff. And one day I'd had a blessing that had kind of prophesied, you could say, that there'd come a time where things would shift and that I would be given something that would provide for the people that I loved. And I was wondering what that was. And I really kind of threw myself wholeheartedly and I prayed like, okay, what is it? Like, what is it? And I had the feeling, get in your car and go down to southern Utah. So got in my car, went to southern Utah. Now, first of all, I'd been driving the same car for about a year, and I had 5 tickets because I didn't have registration. It was back during the days when you had to get everything inspected, and I couldn't fix certain things. So I had 5 tickets. And unbeknownst to me, I had a warrant out for my arrest because of unpaid these tickets for not having registration. And I got pulled, 4 tickets. The last ticket I got on my way down, and I got to the place, I kept going till the Spirit said, get off here. And then I looked up and in my rearview mirror, I saw the lights of the policeman. And he pulled me over. He gave me the biggest ticket up until then. Luckily, I had just passed into the Arizona, so he didn't see that, I had all these other tickets in Utah. I'm going down a rabbit trail. The point being is that it felt miraculous. It was like something tried to deter me just before I got to the place where I was supposed to go. And then I get off and I spent 3 days out there and I went up on a mountain and I said, God, what am I going to do? I feel broken to everything. I can hardly keep a job. I said, I feel like I'm broken to business. I can't really run a business anymore. I said, what am I going to do? And it's got to be something that's already in my pocket because my credit's ruined. I have no money. I don't seem to be able to earn much more than minimum wage. And I said, what can I do that will support my family? What can I give the world that they will remunerate me for in such a way that it provides for my family? And the answer came and it said, or it was, what will the world want? What would the world want that I have? And the thing that came back was your perspective. This is clear answer as anything I'd ever heard. Your perspective. And it so threw me off that I sat there for quite a while like, what? My perspective? And so then I said, so you mean you want me to write something? And it had never crossed my mind in a million years. And so that was when I started to try. So that was that's what brought me to write. For years, I would just write a little bit, something here or there. And then eventually I just started writing every day. It kind of does provide, but it provides in a weird, kind of miraculous, strange sort of way. Anyway.
Interesting. How interesting. And that brings me to a point that sometimes we receive revelation, we think we know what God means, and then we learn what he actually meant.
Yeah, I totally agree, because it's one thing that's been helping me lately, because sometimes my mind will start going still after all these years, like, oh yeah, I could just sell these things and do this and that. And my mind, and then I have to remind myself, oh, that's right. It's 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. It's like in the world I live in, it's like the world that everybody else looks at, it's like, oh, there's the goal right in front of me. And if I just move towards this goal and do A, B, C, then it will get to D. My life doesn't work that way. It's like, if I can see D and I can see A, B, C, that's not the way to get there. It's just like I have to listen, and that actually will shut my mind. I've been grateful for that lately because it'll shut my mind down. My mind's going, and I'm like, all of a sudden, like, wait a minute. If I can see it and I think I know the way, that's for sure not the way there. So I've got to listen and I've got to hear what I need to do next. And that will lead, whatever I hear will lead me in some obscure, out of the way to the thing that I can see that I need to be. So, well, like, yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll keep talking until you say you have a thought and just raise your finger and interrupt me. No, so what I get the feeling, so this is what's coming for the world. This is what's coming for the world. Like the time is coming when if you can see D and you think it's ABC, think again. That's what's coming. Tumultuous times. And we've known, like, I'm not a doomsdayer, like I'm not one to be like, oh, the world's falling apart and get your bunkers. It's like, in fact, I'm just the opposite. It's like, well, yeah, everything's going to fall apart, but, like, don't get your bunkers. Trust, get in a relationship, you know, and, but I get this sense it's the change in the world. It's like people see it. It's like people who've had near-death experiences. A lot of them have said that we're in the time right now where the world is shifting. It's like an evolution of the world. We're going into something different. It's the seventh seal. It's the millennium. It's, and it's like, we get this thought that it's like, oh, it's like overnight. It's like, it changes one person at a time. It's like when he reaches out and he touches your life and he throws you out into a world where you have to depend on him from day to day. That's how you learn. And it's like, and what does he do when he wants to do that for the whole world? Well, puts the whole world out there on a limb, and it's like, and what do you do in that instance? Do you fight for what you think should be yours? It's like, that's what the world's done forever. We're going into a world, I get the feeling, it's like we were talking about before the thing, doing something early. It's like for anybody who's been put into a position where they have to totally trust like this, it's like, it's happening early. It's a blessing because, what happens when the whole world is put into tumult. And it's like, and here's the cool thing, there is a safe place. Like, and it will follow you. It's like a dome of heaven, and it will follow you around. It's like, you don't need the police to keep you safe. You don't need an army to go to war and make you free. That's not how it works. And you are protected. Absolutely. And so that's what we're going to as a world. And we can choose to go down fighting for our own or to surrender to this new way of life, this new life. So.
Yeah, I've heard other people speak of it different people, like you said, near-death experiences and other things that speak of this time. And I think it's interesting because what it's helped me see living this way, because I also have, through my divorce, have had to really learn to rely on the Lord and provide for myself. It's not like it's just me, I've got 7 kids too. I mean, it's hard enough if it was just me, but to have so many people rely on me has been a really growing and expanding experience for me. And it's helped me to come out of the arm of flesh of my own arm, like thinking that I was going to do it, because I can't. Even that, like, even if I put all my time and energy into gardening and canning and getting food storage and packing it away and trying to learn survival skills, like, I don't think those necessarily are bad things, but I cannot even do enough to manage that. I can't provide it all for myself, and I think what it's taught me is that reliance and trust in God and his promises, and the peace that actually can come when you're kind of unplugged from the fear of the chasing of the money and the things. It's, or even just the provision. Once I had this dream I feel like I'm supposed to share, and part of it, I was in the dream, I had like 5 or 6 different situations. I was literally moving from like image of a situation, and it was like a little mini movie played out, and then I would get moved to another location with different people, and I would be shown this other scenario. And one of them, and they were all like last day scenarios, right? One of them was in a city. Actually, 2 of them were in a city, and a couple of them were out in the country. And one particularly, the one I feel like I'm supposed to share, is that, I at the time had food storage lining my walls. Like, it was hard to function in my kitchen because I had like stacked boxes of food storage. And I was doing that to provide for my family, right? I was doing that to make sure that we wouldn't go hungry. But then in this dream, it was really interesting because I was I was in this home, and I had some food storage, and there were shelves and with cans of food and stuff. And this man came to my door, and he had this little child with him. I don't remember if it was a boy or girl. And he asked for something for her because she was hungry. And I was sitting there thinking, well, I can't let a child starve. There's no way I'm going to let this little child starve, especially when I have food. I can't justify that at all. And so I was looking around at all the things that I had. I'm like, well, if I give her rice, then it'll mean that I have rice to spare, and that will make me a target. If I give her, I was like going down a list of things I could offer her, and all of them, the thought came with it, but that will just make you a target. And even water, I was like, well, even if I just give her water, clean water, then I have something like that. Even that will make me a target, because, and I just like came with it, the knowing of how. It was like, and in that moment, I realized I could not, and I had this realization, I cannot give her anything without it making me a target. Nothing. There's nothing I can offer her that couldn't make me a target. And with that came this question. So will I play into that fear and choose to not give her anything because nothing was safe? Or will I choose to have faith and give? And I remember at the end of that one part of the dream, I remember just thinking, well, I'm not going to let her go hungry. So I guess I'll just have to do what I have to do and trust. And it ended. And I've thought about that. It was interesting because I had that dream at a time when the Lord was telling me, because I was praying about what to do with my food storage, because I'm like, I did this because I was trying to be obedient to you, Lord, to what I thought I was expected to do, have a year's supply of food or whatever. And I'm like, I'm trying to be obedient. What am I supposed to do with it? I can't even function in my house, And he told me to give it away. I had spent years accruing that food, worrying about my family, feeling like I wasn't being obedient enough. And he told me to give it away. And it was really interesting. It was kind of hard at the time, but kind of not, because he'd been preparing me for that moment, right? He'd been teaching me and helping me come to that, including that dream, those things that helped me to understand that in the end, what mattered was my trust in him and my love for his children. And I wasn't going to let anyone go hungry, especially not a little kid, Yeah. If I had something I could do to help. And so I know that for myself, since I've moved to Missouri, that's definitely been the lesson for me as well. And it's just been a couple years. You've been living this a lot longer, but I think I feel the same way, that it is somewhere that we all will eventually come to a place where we stop relying on the things of the world and just trust the Lord. There is I think it's part of a revelation of the last days, like the second coming and everything that says that, one woman will be at a spinning wheel and the other will fall. And God has often brought that to my remembrance to remind me, not in a place of fear, but in a place of, I am very careful and I am very capable of taking care of those who trust me, and so he is able to watch out for us, and he will. And he's shown me that over and over and over again in my own life, that it's not like, I love that you said 2 + 2 equals 4 for the world, but it doesn't for you anymore. It's not because I laugh regularly because I feel the same way. And I've had a very similar thought, because with God, it's 2 + 2 = 10, or 2 + 2 = 20 sometimes,
Changes every day.
He is a multiplier. Yeah, it really does. But it's the beauty of it is that there's provision there, and it's provision of the things that matter. And it does teach you the things that maybe matter, or sometimes he provides things for me that I don't feel actually matter that much, right? They're just things that I kind of wanted. But what matters about the message, when he provides it for me, and I sit there thinking, okay, why did God provide this for me when it was just something I wanted and I don't feel it was as necessary? The message is what mattered. The message mattered. And the message was that I mattered. And so sometimes that's the message. And I know that, one of the biggest messages I feel like that has come out of starting this podcast is the message of coming unto Christ and developing a personal relationship with him. And there's so many facets of that. And we're talking about trusting in him, and walking this path of listening. And there's so many other blessings along that path as well that I've touched on in other interviews. But so you mentioned that you write. I'm curious, what is your writing really about? What is it you end up writing about?
So whenever I sit down to write, it's just whatever's on my mind. Sometimes I'll write something. I try to get out of my own head, so I'll just pick something in the parking lot, like that bird over there, or so. But invariably, it usually turns around to something that's deep within my soul, But it's multifaceted. And I think that's one of the things that's, like, when you ask, like, well, what do you write about? Probably the answer is like whatever I want to write about. But if you can imagine going on a journey and you saw a completely new kingdom with animals you'd never seen before, with, a different type of architecture than you'd ever seen before, and people that were different than anybody you'd ever met, and maybe even colors. Like people who have near-death experience say they see colors that don't exist here. I haven't seen that, but it feels like in my heart and in my mind's eye, I've seen something. And so it's like, it's lots of things, one day it might be the people, one day it might be the colors, another day it might be, this animal that, and it's like, but what I think is like I've seen the glimpse of a different kingdom. It's like of a world that works completely differently. And I can tell you probably one of the cool things, I have a friend who always talks about we all have we're different pieces of the puzzle. Almost as if, that parable in the Bible where it says that there's a feast and he wanted all of the upstanding people, the people who got an invitation, he wanted them to come. But all of them were too busy doing good things. You don't realize when you read what they say, it's like they were all doing good things. It's like, well, we got to do this and we got to do that and we got to do the other thing. I was like, I got this to do and I've got an obligation here. I can't come. I'm sorry. And they wouldn't come, but who would come? My impression is it really appears to me that this feast is a potluck. And that it's like you can't come to the potluck when you can only stomach your type of truth or your type of whatever. It's like, if you think that you've got it all, if you think you have all the answers, then you have no interest in the party. You have no interest in this feast. And so you're talking about well, what do I write about? Certain things that are of interest to me. I'll give you a list here in a second. I'm taking forever to answer the question again. But he says we all have these different pieces of the puzzle that we're bringing to the kingdom. That it's like, I'm not big enough. I have the questions. I don't have all the questions that will bring the answers that will make the world anew. But I do know that I have a particular interest in economy, in the economy of God. It's like, why? Because I had some really huge obligations in my life and I failed. It was like, I tried to do it the world's way and it broke me. And it's like, so what have like a lot of my questions to God been about money and providing and how it works and how it works, like, how God does that and how do you it, especially when it's not just one person or two or three or five. You have this group of people that you're providing for. It's like, how do you do that? So my mind is like I have a lot of things to say about economy. I have a lot of things to say about the way that truth disseminates. It's like I'm fascinated to realize, it's like I was raised within a framework where I believe that we had all the answers. And it's like you come to a place where you realize it's like God showed me at one point. I remember it so undid me. He showed me that like what I thought was right was not necessarily right. And what I thought was wrong was not necessarily wrong. That some things that I thought were always wrong were sometimes right. And that some things that I thought were always right were often wrong. And I remember, like, the only way I can describe it is it twisted my mind. I mean, it made it so it was hard to get up and do things. Because if you think about it, like, the way that we get ourselves to do anything is because of belief. Like, I believe I'm sitting outside of Walmart today, if I were to go into that Walmart and get a job, I would have faith that I would receive a paycheck in a couple of weeks. And that's what would get me up and get me to work every day. But it's like, what happened in a way is like when I started to see these things is it was like, it completely like unraveled my faith in the world and the way that it works. To where like my ability to get up and go and like believe that if I did this thing that it would work for me, like was gone. For a while, for a few years, it was like I couldn't get myself to do it. There was a period where I tried taking jobs and my body would literally start shutting down. I would get sick every time I tried to work. And what that ended up in is it ended up in a period where I panhandled for a living. Like I stood on a street corner with a sign and I panhandled. And because every time I tried to work, what's the old song? It's like psychosomatic symptoms, basic or hypertense. It's like I had psychosomatic symptoms that I could not my faith, something happened. It was like twist in the brain, it was like something happened to me. And so I think I rabbit trailed again and I diverged. But the point being is like, what do I write about? It's like, I've begun to see something new, something different. I've begun to see a world that doesn't work on, how good you are, how strong you are, how smart you are, how righteous you are. It's like, it's something else and it blows me away. And it's like, it's a world that runs on love and faith and hope and belief and obedience to the voice that echoes out of the unseen place and tells you to do things. It's like, and it's a miraculous world that is dawning upon civilization right now. And people of all faiths are beginning to see the new world, the new economy, the new life, and so I write about a lot of things, but it's all about the thing that I see coming in that new world. So
I look forward to that day. I really, really do. And I think that we are part of it right now as it begins to settle into the hearts of the people of this world. And I've been a witness to that in my own life and been blessed to now see how others are also walking this path as well all around me. And there's far more of us than we realize. And I'm excited for the people who maybe don't get it now and who hopefully will get it soon, whatever that soon means, because it is a beautiful thing. And there's so many things we worry about in the world that wouldn't be an issue if people were here in their hearts. And so it is a beautiful hope of a better world. And I see it differently now as well. So I'm curious because some of the way that you phrase some of the things makes me wonder if you had a vision or something that actually helped you to see what the world would become or see things differently that kind of catapulted you into this different way of viewing the world. Thank you for being here. And don't forget to subscribe. God bless.